forget the teacher's instructions over the past 8 years. Su Yunju felt a jolt in his heart. The test had succeeded. She had indeed been close by these past few days. But how much did she know about him and the others? How much had she seen? What was she thinking? He had to avoid overthinking it. Delving deeper was terrifying. The more one thought, the more foolish one became. The more one explained, the more guilty one felt. Su Yunju decisively changed the subject. Sitting down across from Su Nua with a relaxed tone, what do you want to eat for lunch? Local cuisine? Or is there something special you have in mind? After a break, I can take you out for a stroll by the West Lake, or we can check out Hafong Street. It's pretty lively there, with lots of snacks and trinkets. Su Nua looked up. Her eyes were bright, staring directly at Su Yunju for a full 3 seconds. Then, she suddenly tugged at the corner of her mouth, revealing a faint smile tinged with self-mockery. Teacher, have you been worn out by them these past couple of days? Su Yunju froze, his hand holding the teacup suspended in midair. He was taken aback. When did this girl become so straightforward? Su Nua noticed his shocked expression, and a hint of a smile flickered in her eyes, but it quickly faded. She sighed lightly, her tone softening. All right, I won't push you, teacher. After a pause, her voice became even quieter as she added seriously. Your health is important, you need to rest more. She then set down her teacup and stood up. Let's go have lunch. As she reached the door, she suddenly turned back and winked at Su Yunju, who was still sitting on the sofa, adding in a teasing tone. As for what someone said 8 years ago about waiting for me to clean up, I've long forgotten. Su Yunju, can I let this slide? He almost instantly sprang up from the sofa, taking 2 steps to Su Nua and reaching for her delicate wrist adorned with beads. However, Su Nua seemed to have anticipated this, effortlessly sidestepping. Su Yunju missed. He paused for a moment and made another attempt. Su Nua still dodged easily, even having the leisure to take a half step back, creating a safe distance between them. Her movements were fluid, showcasing a natural instinct honed through rigorous training. During her 8 years at Xiangbong, she had learned real skills from many masters of martial arts from the Republic era and with real combat experience. Her abilities far surpassed those of Su Yunju, who had remained at the same level since the Crescent Group days. Teacher, don't fight anymore, Su Nua laughed. Her smile much more genuine this time, her eyes sparkling with mischief. I think I shouldn't bully you too much. She tilted her head. Can we go eat first? I'm hungry. Su Yunju looked at the girl in front of him, who was smiling like a little fox, feeling both amused and exasperated. In the end, he could only helplessly retract his hand and sighed. All right, what do you want to eat? Su Nua's eyes instantly lit up. She licked her lips and almost reflexively blurted out, hot pot. After a pause, she added with an almost reverent desire, spicy, the spicier the better. She looked up at Su Yunju, her eyes sparkling. I haven't been back to Daxia for a long time, and I need to satisfy the spicy cravings ingrained in me as a Bazhou person. Su Yunzo watched her transform from the cool and composed figure to a greedy girl in an instant, unable to help but chuckle. What a coincidence, I know a place. The owner says they are genuine locals. Half an hour later, deep in an old alley, they arrived at an inconspicuous hot pot restaurant with a long queue at the entrance. The red oil base was bubbling vigorously in a copper pot divided into sections, sending up spicy steam. The aroma of chili and Sichuan peppercorn filled the entire private room, dominating every inch of the air. Su Nua closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then, she slowly opened her eyes, which glistened with a thin layer of moisture. Her voice was slightly choked, but her face wore a satisfied smile. It tastes like home. Su Yunzo picked up a ladle and carefully dipped a piece of goose intestine into the boiling red soup, swirling it around before placing it in Su Nua's bowl. Give it a try. Su Nua looked down at the curled, red-oiled goose intestine in her bowl, pausing for a few seconds. Then, she picked it up with her chopsticks and brought it to her mouth. She chewed, swallowed, and when she looked up again, her eyes were even redder, but her smile was brighter. Delicious, she said. Su Yunzo looked at her expression, feeling a gentle tug in his heart. While continuing to help her dip tripe and yellow throat into the pot, he casually said, if you have some free time in a few days, how about we go back to visit your hometown? I can accompany you. Su Nua paused for a moment. She didn't answer immediately, just lowered her head and fished out a piece of kung fu kidney. Then, she placed it in Su Yunzo's bowl. Looking up at him, her gaze was calm, and her tone even calmer. Teacher, you should take care of yourself. Su Yunzo replied. Thank you, only to realize something was off. Kidney? Take care? She was still continuing that previous topic. This little girl. Su Nua couldn't help but chuckle at his suddenly darkened expression, her laughter bright and dazzling, like sunlight breaking through after a rainy day. Su Yunzo stared at her joyful laughter, momentarily taken aback, then shook his head and laughed. It's really nice that she can laugh like this. After finishing their meal, Su Yunzo waved to call the waiter for the bill. The owner was a slightly plump, warm-hearted middle-aged man, wearing an apron, who approached with a smile and waved his hands repeatedly. No need, no need. You must be the famous Su Nua, right? A police officer just came by earlier and settled the bill. Su Yunzo was taken aback. Police officer? The owner nodded, his smile carrying a hint of respect and just the right amount of warmth. Yes, he said it was to welcome you. By the way, young man, is your surname Su? That's quite a rare surname. Su Yunzo laughed it off, not explaining further, and walked out of the hot pot restaurant with Su Nua, smiling. A gentle breeze greeted them at the alley entrance, dispersing the strong smell of hot pot from their clothes. Su Yunzo shook his head with a smile and said to Su Nua, no wonder earlier in the restaurant, I saw a security officer hanging around nearby, even glancing towards our private room a few times. It must have been arranged by Sister Shi, on one hand, to welcome you, and on the other hand, probably knowing your identity, to prevent any troublemakers from interrupting. Su Nua nodded, her expression a bit complex. After a moment of silence, she softly said, Sister Shi is actually a really nice person. even though we can't help but argue every time we meet. It's always me who has a good temper and takes the initiative to accommodate her. The last part of her statement lacked confidence, yet she insisted on emphasizing it. Su Yunjo couldn't help but laugh. He suddenly found the arrangement of fate quite interesting. The lively and adorable Lin Ruoxuan from childhood had become a business fanatic. The socially anxious Song Jiru had turned into a fierce competitor, and the once seemingly most obsessive Su Nuo had become the most composed and dignified one. What do you want to do next? Su Yunjo reined in his smile, looking at her with a gentle tone. It's still early. Do you have any plans for the afternoon? Su Nuo raised her head to look at him. Teacher, can you accompany me to watch a movie again? Su Yunjo was puzzled. Didn't you say you don't like watching movies? He recalled that in the game, whenever he suggested watching a movie to help her relax, she always showed little interest, preferring to practice shooting or coding instead. Su Nuo shook her head and said earnestly, I want to experience the daily life of ordinary people. She seemed to want to say ordinary couples, but changed it to the more subtle ordinary people. However, the brief pause and the flicker of emotion in her eyes did not escape Su Yunjo's notice. He understood the word she didn't say, smiled, and naturally reached out to hold her slightly cool hand. Okay, he said. Su Nuo's fingers trembled slightly, but then she tightened her grip. This time, she didn't shy away like she did at the door. Indeed, when a woman is well fed, her mood improves and her defenses loosen. In the cinema, when they saw the giant poster for Doraemon, Nobita's great painting adventure, they both paused in their steps and exchanged a knowing glance. Recognizing the unspoken joy in each other's eyes, it was a connection that transcended time, understood only by them. They almost turned simultaneously, walking toward the ticket counter in perfect sync. Su Nuo even ran to the snack counter next door to buy the largest bucket of chips, hugging it close. It felt as if they had truly returned to many years ago, that winter in Edo, when heavy snow had sealed the city and the air was crisp. They had sat in the cinema watching the Doraemon movie, seeing Nobita, who had lost Doraemon, stubbornly trying again and again in the snow. Clumsily, yet bravely striving to stand up on his own. In the dim theater, at the last row in the corner, Su Nuo sat beside Su Yunjo, holding the bucket of chips. As the light and shadows began to dance on the screen and the cheerful opening music played, she turned her head to look at Su Yunjo's profile, outlined by the shifting lights. She felt that a corner of her heart, which had been vacant for 8 years, was gently filled. This is nice, she thought to herself. Finally, she could truly hold the teacher's hand and walk into the cinema, sharing the same bucket of chips, their fingers occasionally brushing against each other inside. In the dim light, as the screen illuminated the darkness, she could genuinely and closely feel his warm hand without relying on imagination. She could sense the lines on his palm, the temperature of his skin, and even the faint rhythm of his pulse. Unlike before, in a place where she could touch nothing, merely watching virtual shadows and futilely imagining that sensation in her mind. She closed her eyes, savoring this reality that had come 8 years late, yet was finally held tightly in her grasp. Then, she leaned closer to Su Yunjo's ear. The warm breath brushed against his earlobe, her voice carrying a barely detectable quiver. Teacher, she said, unlike Nobita she paused. Her tone imbued with a sense of immense relief and satisfaction that came from regaining something lost. I've also found my Doraemon. After saying that, she quickly, with a touch of shyness yet bravery, gently kissed his cheek. Her soft and slightly cool lips met his for just a moment, like a butterfly landing. This was her second kiss with him. The first time was also in such dim lighting, in a cheap business hotel, fueled by a desperate courage. Su Yunjo turned his head slightly, quietly observing her in the shadows. She was focused, her eyes fixed on the screen, a subtle, relaxed smile gracing her lips. Occasionally, when she saw Nobita make a blunder or witnessed Doraemon's classic exasperated shake of the head, she would let out a soft, low laugh, her shoulders gently rising, like a cat that had stolen a fish snack. Then, she would unconsciously squeeze his hand a bit tighter, as if confirming he was still there, wanting to etch this long-awaited, yet finally real sensation into the deepest part of her memory through her fingertips. Su Yunjo allowed her to hold and squeeze his hand, feeling a warm, peaceful calm within. As the movie ended and the lights came on, he smiled at her while walking out with the crowd, teasingly asking, what do you want to do next? Shall we revisit our old schedule? He counted on his fingers. For instance, go to the amusement park and hear you analyze the gravitational acceleration and adrenaline secretion curve on the drop tower? Or visit a haunted house and watch you walk through it expressionlessly while critiquing the makeup of the NPCs and the ergonomics of the traps. As he spoke, he couldn't help but laugh. Those quirky yet warm memories that belonged solely to them felt as vivid as yesterday. But after the laughter, he checked the time and smoothly transitioned to the next arrangement. However, after 8 o'clock tonight, I might have to leave for a bit. He was referring to the concert that Song Jiru was holding at the Binjo Sports Center. He had promised to attend. Su Nuo blinked. The teacher really remembers everything. Those trivial, even somewhat absurd conversations and experiences had passed so many years ago, yet he had not forgotten. She released Su Yunjo's hand and stopped walking. Turning to face him. Teacher, she said softly. Su Yunjo responded, Su Nuo raised her hand, pointing to a hotel by Westlake. Let us go there, she said. Su Yunjo was taken aback. What? Su Nuo stepped closer, leaning in to whisper in his ear. The warmth of her breath brushed against his earlobe as she softly said, I want. She paused for a moment, her voice laced with a smile and a hint of assertiveness, to play teacher. At the top floor of the hotel, in a lakeside suite. Thick curtains were not drawn tightly, leaving a small gap. Outside the window, the West Lake sparkled under the afternoon sun, resembling scattered fragments of gold. Boats glided across the lake, leaving long white trails, while the distant mountains stood in clear outline. Only one floor lamp in the corner of the suite was turned on, casting a warm, soft glow. Su Nuo stood with her back to Su Yunju at the edge of the bed. Just like years ago at a hot spring hotel in Hokkaido, she slowly and meticulously began to remove her clothing, folding each piece carefully and placing them on the nearby single sofa. A moon-white shirt, black trousers, and light-colored undergarments. Finally, she turned around. In the dim light, her skin was as fair as fine mutton fat jade, radiating a gentle sheen. The most striking feature was the dark, antique amulet hanging at her chest, tied with a red thread, resting right above her heart. Against her pale skin, the dark hue stood out, almost glaring. Even more startling was the clear mark of a bullet hole at the center of the amulet, with slightly deformed and indented edges. Su Yunju's gaze was instantly drawn to the bullet hole, his pupils constricting. He recognized the amulet. One of the gifts he had sent to her through Su Sini back then, but he had never imagined it would bear such a mark. Arno. His voice was somewhat dry, his eyes reflecting undeniable fear. He couldn't even dare to imagine the moment the bullet whizzed in and struck the amulet. What kind of peril was that? What kind of impact? What kind of brush with death? Su Nuo noticed his suddenly pale face and the worry in his eyes. Yet she smiled gently. She raised her hand, her fingertips lightly tracing the indented bullet hole on the amulet. Her touch as tender as if caressing a precious antique. That time, during the Fei rescue operation, her voice was calm, as if recounting someone else's story. A stray bullet, at a tricky angle, headed straight for my heart. She paused, her fingertip resting on the bullet hole, but it was blocked by this amulet. She lifted her gaze to Su Yunju. It was so close. Really, just a little bit. The force of the bullet was immense. I was jolted and nearly lost my breath. But the bullet couldn't penetrate. She gently shook her head, her tone imbued with a near-religious conviction. I just knew. The teacher has always quietly protected me. Even if you're not by my side. Even across mountains and rivers. Even. She didn't finish her sentence. But Su Yunju understood. Even if you have someone else by your side, you still protect me. Su Yunju's throat tightened. A wave of mixed emotions, fear, heartache, and guilt, overwhelmed him in an instant. He almost uncontrollably stepped forward and bent down. Her lips gently pressed against the bullet-ridden amulet, devout as a believer kissing a sacred relic. However, in the next moment, she reached out and embraced his lowered head. Her arms wrapped around his neck, applying a slight pressure to pull him closer to her heart. Through the amulet, he could clearly hear her suddenly quickening heartbeat. Teacher, her voice rang out above him, laced with a barely perceptible tremor and hidden desire. It was no longer the calmness of the one known as Nuo, but rather that of a fragile and stubborn girl in the attic of Edo. She whispered softly, her breath brushing through his hair, Teach me like before. Tell me what to do next. Chapter 157. Sun No meets Song Jiru again after the lesson. The sky outside had turned to dusk, the waters of West Lake bathed in warm gold, the distant mountains softened in outline. Su Yunju leaned against the headboard, watching Sun Nuo beside him, who had turned away and was leisurely putting on her clothes. The curve of her waist was so beautiful that he couldn't help but reach out to touch it. Teacher, Sun Nuo didn't turn her head, her voice a bit hoarse, but her tone had returned to its usual calmness. Can you take me to Song Jiru's concert tonight? Su Yunju's hand froze instantly. A concert? The unsettling dream from the previous night flashed through his mind. The sudden gunfire under the dazzling lights of the stadium, the terrified crowd fleeing. While Sun Nuo stood at the center of chaos, her gaze cold and empty, the gun in her hand dissipating smoke. Despite later experiencing Sun Nuo's remorse in the game, he still felt a sense of fear and instinctively wanted to refuse. Do you really have to go? Is the real battlefield going to start here, in this way? After all, Sun Nuo had once harbored murderous intent towards Song Jiru, seeing her as the enemy responsible for her father's death, although she had later come to her senses. Given up, and even reached a subtle reconciliation with Song Jiru to some extent. That was 8 years ago. Now, after 8 years, things had changed, and people had moved on. Sun Nuo had experienced far more darkness and bloodshed than he could imagine, and her temperament was no longer the same. And now, she had personally witnessed the intimacy between him and Song Jiru. Who knew what new thoughts she might have at this moment? Had she completely let go? Or would she deal with this so-called enemy in a calmer, deadlier way? Just then, Sun Nuo turned around. She smiled gently, reaching out to smooth his slightly disheveled hair. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to cause trouble. I just want to see her again. After a pause, her voice lowered, revealing an almost resigned calmness. After all, you're going to live with her and Lin in the future, right? There was no resentment, no questioning in her words. Only a serene acceptance of reality that made Su Yunju's heart tighten. He frowned and grasped her still extended hand. Then what about you? Sun Nuo's lips curled into a slight smile, her expression tinged with a hint of helplessness. Along with the calmness of someone who held all the cards, what else can I do? She withdrew her hand and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The sunset's afterglow filtered through the glass, casting a fuzzy golden edge around her. The teacher left me with such a huge responsibility back then. Managing the various factions within the organization, both old and new, across both coasts of the Pacific, with so many overt and covert businesses to handle, and so many intricate relationships to maintain, not to mention the numerous rivals lurking around. She turned her back to him, her voice steady, with only a hint of fatigue at the end. I don't have much time to stay in the country. After a moment of silence, she let out a soft sigh. Right, esteemed elder. Su Yunjo immediately understood her implicit meaning. She felt that Su Yunjo, in the guise of an elder, had left a prophecy for her to take charge of the organization, perhaps not just because of her capabilities. The key factor was to throw her far overseas, into that vast and complex world that could drain all her energy. This way, she wouldn't remain in the country, by his side, becoming an unpredictable and uncontrollable variable, even a potential threat. After all, among the individuals he was currently nurturing, She was the only one who had truly taken a life, the most lethal presence. Su Yunzhou looked at Su Nua standing against the light, her somewhat frail figure stirring a wave of intense guilt and heartache within him. He lifted the blanket, got out of bed, walked to her back, and gently wrapped his arms around her shoulders. He felt her body stiffen for a brief moment before she gradually relaxed and leaned into him. Arno, he called her softly. Su Nua replied without turning around. In the future, Su Yunzhou tightened his embrace, resting his chin on the top of her head, inhaling the faint fragrance of her hair. I will come to see you often. Really? Her voice was muffled, coming from her chest. Really, he promised, extremely serious. No matter if you are in San Francisco or anywhere else in the world. As long as you want, as long as I have time. Su Nua remained silent for a long time. Long enough that Su Yunzhou thought she wouldn't respond. Then, he felt the person in his arms lightly nodding. Okay, she said, just one word. That evening, at the Binzhou Olympic Sports Center Gymnasium, the concert was about to begin, and the venue was already filled with a sea of people, a wave of glow sticks rippling in the night, with fan cheers almost shaking the roof. Su Yunzhou led Su Nua through the bustling crowd. Staff from a certain media company were anxiously waiting at the entrance of the VIP passage. When they saw Su Yunzhou and Su Nua appear, the staff's eyes lit up, and they quickly jogged over, their attitude respectful to the point of humility. Mr. Su. This lady. This way, please. As they guided them, the staff explained rapidly. Teacher Song specifically instructed us to wait for both of you here. We haven't seen you. And Teacher Song is a bit anxious, having called twice to ask. Upon hearing this, Su Yunzhou felt a bit amused, yet strangely regretful. TSK. They didn't even trigger a classic scene of a security guard looking down on others only to be slapped in the face. This generation of security staff had too high of a professional standard, poor rating. He silently complained in his mind while following the staff directly through the employee passage into the venue. The corridor was slightly dim, echoing with the faint warm-up music and the cheers of fans from the venue. The air was filled with the scent of cables, dust, and an atmosphere of nervous excitement. Moving smoothly, they arrived at the backstage area. This place was completely different from the noise outside. Although it was busy, there was a sense of order. Makeup artists, stylists, backup dancers, band members, and staff were bustling about, speaking in low tones, making final checks and preparations. At the entrance of the largest dressing room, adorned with the name of the star, they spotted tonight's main character. She was fully styled, wearing a custom-made, dazzling, sequined wedding gown that sparkled brilliantly under the bright lights of the dressing room, almost blinding in its radiance. In that moment, she was no longer the girl by the West Lake who clung to her older brother, but rather an Asian diva ready to step onto the grand stage. Exuding a commanding presence, she was intently confirming the ear monitor and staging with the director, her expression serious and focused. However, when she caught a glimpse of Su Yunzhou and Su Nua out of the corner of her eye, her seriousness instantly vanished, and her eyes lit up. Big brother. Oh, Nua, you made it. She almost lifted her skirt and flew over like a joyful little bird, completely disregarding the surprised looks from the staff around her. Upon reaching them, she first gave Su Yunzhou a radiant smile, then without hesitation, opened her arms and gave Su Nua a hearty and enthusiastic hug. That's wonderful. Nua, I'm so happy you could come. Su Yunzhou was left puzzled. Why wasn't she hugging me? Why Su Nua? Did I get the script wrong? Su Nua, taken by surprise from the sudden embrace, froze for a moment. She wasn't used to such direct and warm physical contact, especially in front of so many people. But soon, she relaxed, even lifting her hand to gently pat Song Jiru's back, a faint but sincere smile appearing on her face. Teacher Song, she spoke, her voice calm. Good luck tonight. Song Jiru nodded vigorously, releasing her and looking brightly at both her and Su Yunzhou. With you two down there, I'll definitely perform beyond expectations. She turned to greet Song Jinxian, who was walking briskly towards them. Director Song, these two distinguished guests tonight will be in your care. Song Jinxian had already spotted Su Yunzhou and Su Nua. She quickened her pace, her face breaking into a warm yet respectful smile as she actively extended her hands towards Su Nua. Nua, your presence is truly an honor. Her voice was slightly higher than usual, filled with surprise and excitement. We never expected you to grace us with your presence tonight. If Jiru had known you were coming, she would have been even more thrilled. As she spoke, she grasped Su Nua's hands with both of hers, her warm attitude a stark contrast to her usual commanding demeanor. Why didn't you give me a heads up earlier? I could have arranged for a special car to pick you up. This is too neglectful. With a faint smile on her face, Su Nua calmly held out her hand and said, Mr. Song, you are too polite. She glanced at Su Yunzhou beside her and added naturally, I came with Mr. Su. By the way, I wanted to listen to Teacher Song's concert. I hope it's not a bother. Song Jiru quickly waved her hand, her smile bright and innocent. Not at all. It's our honor to have you here. We couldn't ask for more. Only then did Song Jinxian realize the closeness between Su Nua and Su Yunzhou, and she felt a sudden chill run down her spine. Who exactly is this Su Yunzhou? Isn't he just an ordinary programmer from a nondescript investment firm under my company? Wasn't he the one worrying about his mortgage a few days ago, heartbroken after being cheated on by his ex-girlfriend, drowning his sorrows in a club? How did he suddenly become the center of attention for my powerful cousin Lin Ruoxuan? And Song Jiru didn't even hide her affection for him, bringing him into the hotel right in front of me. The top celebrity Shin Mingyue even publicly claimed to be unable to get him, lowering herself to an unprecedented level. The influential Su family in the city treats him like an esteemed guest, calling him Mr. with such respect. Even the Nobel Prize-winning academician Qin Shi was moved to tears upon meeting him, exclaiming that a deity had returned. And now, even the head of a century-old overseas gang, Mr. Nua, seems to have a close relationship with him. almost taking a subordinate role? Is the world completely insane? Or have I unknowingly crossed into some bizarre parallel universe? An even more absurd thought uncontrollably flashed through her mind. Could it be that the kiss I forcibly gave him while drunk a few days ago will become my greatest bragging right in the social circles for the rest of my life? Su Yunzhou, standing beside her, was utterly confused, his expression blank. What is going on? It's one thing for Wenxi to know Su Nua, but how do Song Jiaru and Song Jinxian know her as well? And looking at Song Jinxuan's attitude, the respect mixed with eagerness clearly indicates a relationship beyond the ordinary. Unable to contain his curiosity, he quietly asked the beaming Song Jiaru, "How do you know each other?" Upon hearing his question, Song Jiaru turned her head and blinked her beautifully made-up eyes. "Oh, a few years ago, we went to a certain country for a tour concert, and during the stop in Los Angeles." She wrinkled her nose, as if recalling an unpleasant memory. "We were targeted by a local entertainment agency that supposedly had ties to the mafia, trying to extort exorbitant protection fees and wanting to interfere with our box office and sponsorship profits. They were extremely arrogant, even bringing a group of tattooed men to intimidate us during negotiations." As she spoke, her tone became lighter, and her gaze towards Su Nua was filled with gratitude and admiration. "We were abroad, unfamiliar with the place, and the process of reporting to the police was slow. The other party had deep local connections, and we were at our wits' end. Then, somehow, the news got out. A couple of days later, the other party personally came with people, carrying gifts, to apologize, saying it was all a misunderstanding, that they wouldn't take a single penny, and guaranteed the absolute safety of our subsequent concerts. Later, we asked many people and took several turns before we heard some whispers from local elderly Chinese." She lowered her voice, sharing a secret with excitement. It was a word from a certain influential figure. It said that people on that side, regardless of their background, particularly respect this person. A word from this individual on the West Coast is more effective than any official approval. Since then, I have gradually become more familiar with this person. We occasionally exchanged emails to check in on each other. When she comes to East Asia or I go to North America, we would meet for tea and chat. She knows a lot, and every conversation is enlightening." As Song Jiaru spoke, she suddenly seemed to recall something, looked at Su Yunzhu, then at Xunhua, and a knowing smile appeared on her face. "Oh, I understand now." She had been vaguely guessing whether Xunhua's assistance back then was also a result of a request from her elder brother, just like Grandma Wu Shuyun. She had tried to probe this indirectly before, but at that time, Xunhua always smiled lightly and deflected with reasons like, "Teacher Song is our pride as Basha people. How could I stand by and do nothing?" and never mentioned anything further, leaving her uncertain. Now, seeing Xunhua and Su Yunzhu standing side by side, that unspoken understanding revealed the truth. It turned out she was also involved. The mystery was solved. Su Yunzhu listened to Song Jiaru's vivid recounting, momentarily speechless. His heart was filled with mixed emotions, hard to articulate. It turned out that during those years when he was naive and overwhelmed, struggling with work and life pressures, Xunhua had quietly grown to a level that was impressive, even requiring admiration. Her influence had already crossed oceans, reaching the world of those around him, silently providing an invisible umbrella of protection for the people he cared about in the unseen corners of his life. She hadn't become the paranoid troublemaker he subconsciously feared. Instead, she was quietly guarding those he cared about. He had even had absurd nightmares about her going on a rampage at a concert, which he now found ridiculous. However, seeing Song Jiaru's adorable expression of "I understand everything now, praise me for being clever," Su Yunzhu couldn't help but let his mischievous side surface. He touched his nose and cleared his throat. "Well, Teacher Song, let me tell you a secret." He paused to successfully capture all of Song Jiaru's attention. Her big eyes filled with curiosity. "Actually, you met this influential person back in 2015. Song Jiaru, huh? Really?" Her eyes were filled with confusion as she tried to recall. At the beginning of 2015, her elder brother had clearly been by her side, accompanying and guiding her in his own special way. How could she completely forget meeting such a uniquely charismatic person back then? She naturally had no idea that the shy, slender girl who had lowered her head and almost fled in panic upon seeing her at the matcha ice cream shop in Kyoto was the same person as the confident and composed leader of the Shangbang standing before her. Upon hearing this, Su Nua's lips curved slightly, revealing a knowing yet somewhat helpless smile. She took over the conversation, speaking calmly to ease the situation for Su Yunzhou. "Mr. Su is right." She looked at Song Jiaru with a gentle gaze. "When I was younger and hadn't left the country yet, I had the privilege of hearing Teacher Song's song from a distance at a public event." After a pause, she casually added a reasonable explanation. "But there were so many people back then, and I was rather inconspicuous, so it's perfectly normal that Teacher Song doesn't remember." As she spoke, her hand, which had been hanging at her side, discreetly reached to pinch Su Yunzhou's waist, not too hard, but enough to convey a warning for him to keep quiet about her past. Chapter 159. The 13-year promise. Su Yunzhou chuckled. Suddenly, he felt that arranging for Su Nua to take charge of the Shangbang in the future might not stem from any petty desire to stabilize his harem or resolve conflicts. She truly had the capability, the charisma, and the responsibility. Song Jiaru was a bit baffled by the conversation they had back in 2015. But upon glancing at the rapidly ticking clock on the wall, she realized time was indeed of the essence. "Big brother, Nua." She waved at the two with a bright smile like summer sunshine. "I need to get ready to go on stage. Excuse me. Have fun. I've arranged a VIP box for you, and Song Dong will show you the way." After saying this, she took a deep breath, straightened her back, and instantly transformed back into the radiant diva, striding confidently toward the stage with the staff and bodyguards surrounding her. Her silhouette was resolute, her steps light, as if she were a queen heading into her own battlefield. Song Jinxian smiled and gestured for Su Yunzhou and Su Nuo to follow. Mr. Su, no. The VIP box is ready. With the best view, please follow me. Su Yunzhou nodded and looked at Su Nuo beside him. She was also looking at him. Their eyes gently met in the air. She slightly curved her lips, the smile subtle, yet seemingly rich with unspoken words. Su Yunzhou understood instantly. They had communicated in their minds for so many years, and the basic understanding and silent agreement were still there. She was using her eyes to tell him, see? I didn't let you down, did I? I said I would apologize to Song Jiru on behalf of my father, and I will protect the ones you care about. I keep my promises. I, Su Nuo, am a person of my word. Let us go, teacher, she said softly. The three of them arrived at the spacious and comfortable VIP box located above the side of the stage, which offered an excellent view. One wall was made of large one-way glass, providing an unobstructed view of the entire stage. Song Jinxian had specially arranged for a set of purple clay tea utensils to be brought in. She personally sat before the TC, skillfully warming the teapot, placing the tea leaves, brewing, and pouring into cups, her movements flowing gracefully with a deliberate elegance. After all, in her view, someone like Su Nuo, who presided over an ancient gang and navigated the gray areas of the underworld, should prefer traditional and refined ways of hospitality. Soon, it was time for the performance. The massive dome of the arena gradually dimmed its lights. The illumination receded from the edges to the center like a tide. Ultimately, the vast space that could accommodate 30,000 people fell into pure darkness. Only the sporadic glow sticks in the audience flickered, resembling faint phosphorescence scattered in the deep sea. Suddenly, bang! A beam of pure white spotlight pierced through the darkness without warning, striking straight at the center of the stage. In the light column, countless specks of dust danced wildly, swirling as if they were joyful spirits startled by this sacred radiance. At the end of this light beam, Song Jiru appeared quietly in a dazzling wedding dress, as if born from the light, coming into view of everyone. She walked step by step along this path of light towards the front edge of the stage, like a bride approaching her coronation ceremony, or a warrior stepping onto her exclusive battlefield. She was breathtakingly beautiful and powerfully strong. She reached the very front of the stage and stood still, bathed in light. The countless crystals and tassels on her wedding dress reflected dazzling colors under the spotlight, making it seem as if she herself was glowing. She slightly raised her face and took a deep breath, gripping the microphone tightly. The deep breath, slightly amplified by the top-notch sound system, was clearly audible in the silent arena filled with thousands. Then, she spoke. Before singing the first song tonight, she paused. The sound of her inhalation broke the silence again, carrying a slight, yet clearly audible, quiver and tremor. I would like to take about a minute of your time. She raised her other hand, not holding the microphone, gently pressing it against her chest. The crystal wedding dress produced a delicate and crisp sound with her movement, resembling the sound of a heart breaking. 13 years ago, her voice was soft yet possessed a strange penetrating quality. A person who was very important to me appeared in my life. A slight stir and curious whispers arose from the audience. At that time, she paused as if recalling, her voice taking on a hint of distant shyness belonging to her younger self. I was not brave enough to sing in front of so many people. I was afraid of the camera, afraid of the emptiness of the stage, afraid of the blinding lights, and even afraid of the gazes of others. Encouraging shouts came from the audience. Go Jiru! Song Jiru heard them and slightly nodded in the direction of the voices, revealing a grateful smile. But that smile was soon replaced by deeper emotions. It was that person. Her voice became more choked. When I doubted myself the most, and wanted to hide, they told me. She mimicked the gentle and certain tone from her memory. Jiru, your voice can touch people's hearts. You can bring comfort, strength, and light to countless people like you who are experiencing darkness, confusion, and loneliness. Some sensitive fans in the audience began to quietly sob. Tears streamed uncontrollably down Song Jiru's face, sparkling in her eyes. He told me at that time. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. But it still trembled. If one day, you can overcome all your fears, stand on the biggest stage, and sing the song I wrote for you. She paused for a full 3 seconds. Tears fell. Yet, at that moment, her voice miraculously became incredibly clear and firm, even if by then, I am no longer by your side. It will definitely be the proudest moment of my life. The audience erupted into an intense wave of applause, screams, and wild shouts. Many fans were already in tears, vigorously waving their glowing sticks. Song Jiru's tears poured down like a flood, but she stubbornly did not wipe them away. Instead, she raised her face, letting the tears sparkle like diamonds under the spotlight. She took a deep breath, her voice tinged with emotion, but growing brighter and steadier. This sentence is like a seed. It has been buried in my heart for 13 years. These 13 years. She slowly shook her head, her smile bittersweet and complex. I have experienced the lows of being overlooked, faced ridicule and doubt from the internet, gone through countless breakdowns in the recording studio, and nights of crying in hotel rooms, wanting to give up. The sobs from the audience melded into one. The sea of glowing sticks began to sway rhythmically, slowly, like a breath. But each time, her voice suddenly rose, filled with the power of breaking free. Every time I close my eyes, I can hear that voice saying in my ear. She imitated, using the gentlest, most determined tone, softly saying those 4 words, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Chapter 160. I like you, it's my exclusive memory. The audience went completely wild. Ah! The cries, screams, applause, and the sound of glowing sticks waving wildly merged into an emotional torrent capable of lifting the roof. Song Jiru stood there, standing in that one beam of light, standing in her own sea of tears, standing in the starry sea formed by the unconditional love of 30,000 people and 10 years of shared memories. She took another deep breath. Tears continued to flow, but her voice suddenly became incredibly firm. Today, she lowered her head, looking at the wedding dress adorned with 10 years of obsession.